All right, let's dive into one of the biggest puzzles on the planet, India's land. We're talking about how a nation with over 1.4 billion people manages to live, eat, and grow on a piece of Earth that, well, isn't getting any bigger. It's this incredible balancing act, and we're going to unpack it.
And that's really the question at the heart of it all, isn't it? Every single highway, every new apartment building, every plate of food, it all has to come from the same fixed resource. You can't just make more land. So getting this right, the stakes are unbelievably high.
Now get a load of this number, 57%. That's the percentage of India's entire landmass that's used for cultivation, for growing things. To put that in perspective, the world average is just 12%. It tells you that from coast to coast, India's land is working overtime, pushed to its absolute limit just to keep everyone fed.
Okay, so how on earth do you manage that kind of pressure? Well, you need a system, a really good one. India's Land Revenue Department basically has this giant national filing system where every single square inch of the country is sorted and categorized. Let's take a look at how they do it.
So, first up, you've got what you could call the productive lands. This is the land that's actively working for you. It includes the net sown area, which is just a fancy way of saying all the fields that are being farmed. And then you have forests. What's interesting here is this isn't just about where the trees are. It's also any land that government has officially drawn a line around and said, this is a forest, protecting it by law.
Next, you have the lands that are taking a breather. You've got current fallow land, which is basically a field left to rest for a year or less to get its nutrients back. Then other fallow is land that's been resting for 1 to 5 years. But then there's this really fascinating category called culturable wasteland.
And this category, this is where you can see the economics of a country changing in real time. This is perfectly good farmland that nobody has touched for over 5 years. Why? Well, maybe a new highway just got built next to it, and suddenly that plot of land is way more valuable as a spot for a warehouse than it is for growing wheat.
And the last big bucket is, well, everywhere else. This is the land that's officially put to non-agricultural use. We're talking our cities, our roads, our factories. It also includes all the pastures and grazing lands for livestock, and even areas with miscellaneous tree crops, like the local mango groves that aren't part of a huge farm.
Now here's something that is absolutely crucial to understand. Not all land is owned by one person or one company. In rural India, so many people rely on what are called common property resources. Think of a shared village pasture where anyone can graze their cattle. These shared lands are a vital economic safety net for millions.
So you have all these neat categories, but do they stay that way forever? As a country's economy totally transforms, does the land itself stay the same? The answer is a huge, resounding no. As a nation changes, the very map of the land gets redrawn right under our feet.
So let's talk about that transition. Because what's happening right now across India is a massive reshaping of the country. Economic growth is literally changing the ground we stand on.
I mean, think about it. In the past, India's economy was all about agriculture. But today, the real growth is coming from industry and services. And that shift has a direct, massive impact on land use. A piece of land that was only good for a farm a generation ago is now prime real estate for a new factory or an office park.
And the numbers, well, they tell the story pretty clearly. Since the 1960s, the land used for things like cities and roads has nearly doubled. And, interestingly, the amount of land officially designated as forest has also gone up, which reflects some serious conservation efforts.
But on the flip side, that land has to come from somewhere, right? It's a zero-sum game. So what we're seeing is that barren land is being put to use, which makes sense. But crucially, those common pastures and grazing lands are shrinking, and that puts enormous pressure on the very people who rely on those shared resources to survive.
So with all this pressure, with less land available, how does India's agricultural engine even keep running? Well, it's a story of trying to squeeze more out of less.
Okay, this number really puts it all into perspective. On average, India has just 0.31 hectares of land per person. Compare that to many other countries, and it's tiny. What this means is that India simply can't solve its food problem by finding more land to farm. That option isn't on the table. It has to make the land it already has work harder.
And this right here is the main strategy for doing that. It's called cropping intensity. It basically means instead of planting one crop a year on a piece of land, you figure out how to plant 2 or maybe even 3. You use irrigation, you plan different crop cycles. It's not about farming more land, it's about farming the same land more often.
But, and this is a really big but,
even with clever strategies like that, Indian agriculture is facing a wall of really deep, really tough challenges.
You know, this really gets to the strange paradox of it all. You have more than half the country working in agriculture, but the sector as a whole struggles with low productivity and incredible hardship. There's a huge disconnect there. And the problems just keep stacking up. You've got the challenges from nature, like relying on monsoon rains that you can never be sure about. You've got economic problems, like family farms that have been split into tiny, unprofitable plots. And then you have these huge systemic issues, like soil that's been degraded over time and a lack of access to modern farming knowledge. It all adds up to a massive barrier for millions of people.
So, when you put all of this together, the growing population, the modernizing economy, the pressures on agriculture, the changing climate, you have to ask, what is the future of India's land? How can all these competing demands possibly be balanced? You know, at the end of the day, the solution isn't just about farming a bit better or building slightly smarter cities. It's about unlocking the full potential of every square meter. The real question is, can India innovate fast enough to turn its biggest limitation, its finite land, into the very thing that drives its future? That's the puzzle.